Welcome. This is Audie Cornish, the moderator of today's debate about Section 215 of the Patriot Act. The topic of our debate today concerns the upcoming expiration of 215 of the Patriot Act, which allows security officials to pursue, quote, any tangible things that could be relevant to a national security investigation. This could include personal materials such as books, library patron records, phone records, and other documentation. The question at hand is as follows. Resolved that Section 215 of the USA Patriot Act should be allowed to expire on June 1st, 2015. Here to discuss this issue today, we have Susan N. Herman, Centennial Professor at Brooklyn Law School and President of the American Civil Liberties Union. James Clapper, U.S. Intelligence Chief and Director of National Intelligence. Congressman James Sensenbrenner represents the 5th Congressional District of Wisconsin. Emily Sheketoff, Executive Director of the American Library Association's Washington office. Marco Rubio, U.S. Senator from Florida, and Martha McSally, U.S. Representative of the 2nd District of Arizona, who serves on both the Armed Services and Homeland Security Congressional Committees. I will invite each panelist to give a 1-minute opening statement at this time. Congressman James Sensenbrenner, will you please begin?
Thank you, Ms. Cornish. I believe the Patriot Act made Americans safer by enhancing the government's ability to find and stop terrorist attacks. We were careful to maintain the civil liberties that distinguished us from our enemies. However, I've changed my stance of support for the Patriot Act because the government misapplied the law and upset the balance between privacy and security that we had thought to preserve 14 years ago when I wrote the Patriot Act. In a feat of legal gymnastics, the administration convinced the FISA court that because some records in the universe of every phone call Americans make might be relevant to counterterrorism, the entire universe of calls must be relevant. That decision opened the floodgates to a practice of bulk collection that Congress never intended when the Patriot Act was passed. Section 215 must not be extended unless the practice of bulk collection is ended, transparency is increased, and a proper balance between privacy and security is reestablished. Thank you.
Director Clapper, will you continue?
The U.S. Patriot Act was designed to ensure the safety of America by finding and stopping terrorist attacks before they start. While I do agree that there are reforms that could be made to Section 215, as have been outlined by Senator Patrick Leahy, it is absolutely crucial to the security of America and the citizens that the U.S. Patriot Act, as well as Section 215, continue on as a front line of defense for our country.
Ms. Herman, please continue.
Thank you, Ms. Cornish. Librarians are custodians to the intellectual freedoms that we enjoy as U.S. citizens, and Section 215 of the Patriot Act creates a hindrance to our free access to the knowledge housed in libraries. Section 215 allows the government to spy on patron activities, thereby discouraging people from exercising their right to free expression guaranteed by the First Amendment. Section 215 must be allowed to expire, thereby ending the unjust practice of commandeering library records by the government. Thank you.
Ms. Sheketoff, please continue.
Section 215 of the Patriot Act has been called the library provision. The American Library Association is committed to preserving the free and open exchange of knowledge and information and the privacy rights of all, to include library users, library employees, and the general public. ALA opposes use of any governmental power to suppress the free and open exchange of knowledge and information. The Patriot Act includes provisions such as Section 215 that threaten the free and open exchange of knowledge and information. We cannot allow this to continue.
Marco Rubio, your opening statement.
Thank you, Ms. Cornish. To allow Section 215 of the Patriot Act to expire would be to ignore the lesson of September 11th and to risk future terrorist attacks. We should not curtail intelligence gathering capabilities that have been legally and painstakingly established following those horrific attacks. The U.S. government should implore American technology companies to cooperate with authorities so that we can better track terrorist activity and monitor terrorist communications as we face the increasing challenge of homegrown terrorists radicalized by little more than what they see on the internet. I urge my colleagues to consider a permanent extension of the counterterrorism tools our intelligence community relies on to keep the American people safe.
And finally, Representative McSally.
Thank you. So the people of America want Congress to work for them, and that is what the Patriot Act is doing, and will continue to do if we keep it. As the first woman to fly and command an Air Force squadron in combat and 26 years in uniform, I can see that some of what the government does is not what we want to hear, but it is necessary to maintain the safety of our nation. If Section 215 expires, we will be open to the floodgates of terrorist attacks, potentially greater than 9/11. Also, the Patriot Act mainly protects Americans, but it also is a tool for worldwide protection. I mean, terrorists at bay. We cannot afford to have Section 215 expire.
Thank you, panelists. I'll now move on to the questions. First, Director Clapper, Representative McSally, and Senator Rubio, a question for you. The Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board has recently reported that the mass data collection project under Section 215 has been ineffective. If programs like this are not actually effective in countering terrorism, what is the justification for any extension of this law? Mr. Clapper.
I believe that by keeping Section 215, we are exercising the old saying of better safe than sorry. For example, my house has never burned down, but I buy fire insurance just in case. At this point in time, you may consider the data collection to be invasive and ineffective in countering terrorism, but if a preventable attack were to occur after Section 215 were dissolved, would those who voted to end it hold themselves responsible for this attack? Or would they simply point fingers at the intelligence community and ask what we could have done to prevent this attack?
Yes, Senator Rubio.
Ms. Cornish, the world is as dangerous as ever, and extremists are being cultivated and recruited right here at home. This legislation would significantly weaken and, in some cases, entirely do away with some of the most important counterterrorism capabilities at our disposal. Listen, lofty speeches and half measures do not defeat terrorist groups. They also do not keep Americans safe in the long term. The threat from Islamic extremism is only growing, and without greater leadership from the United States, I fear that it will only be a matter of time before innocent Americans pay the ultimate price if we continue to underestimate our enemy and do not develop a strategy that is commensurate to the threat. This is why we cannot afford to eliminate the intelligence gathering capability. Thank you, Ms. Cornish.
And Representative McSally.
The Patriot Act has received bad reputation throughout the media, but that does not mean that it's not working. It is a form of insurance, and just like our Navy and our Army base, we do not intend to use them or go into war, but we make sure that we have a strong Army and a strong Navy, just in case. And the Patriot Act does the same thing. It is an insurance. This is not an optional expense. This is a vital necessity for the security of our nation.
Thank you. I will now invite rebuttals to these statements from the pro-expiration side of the argument. Ms. Herman, would you like to begin?
Thank you. There's simply no justification for extending 215. In general, the information given to the public about how 215 has been used or how effective it is has been extremely misleading from its inception. John Ashcroft famously called the librarian response to 215, quote, baseless hysteria. And in 2003, he claimed that 215 hadn't been used at all. It then became very clear that the government was demanding information on patrons from libraries on an entirely different provision of the Patriot Act. The messages we receive in general from government are mixed, and we're clearly not gaining any safety from terrorists by taking away freedoms.
Ms. Shakedoff, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you. Snowden's leaks have only deepened the concern about the degradation of privacy rights. Now we know that it really didn't matter what they passed. What they were sweeping up was everything, way beyond what anyone had ever envisioned. Librarians have deployed new methods to protect patron privacy. As technology has changed, we've moved from the card catalog and paper records to electronic records. We're always looking for ways to destroy the record as soon as we can. When you return a book, the record is destroyed so that when the government comes, we can say that we legitimately don't know what you have out until that time.
Thank you. Congressman Sensenbrenner, do you have something to say?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Ms. Cornish. I agree with Ms. Shake It Off that Mr. Snowden's disclosures are what helped open my eyes to the abuses of Section 215. Secret laws were being used to enact bulk collection of American citizens' data. As the author of the Patriot Act, I am extremely disturbed by what appears to be an overbroad interpretation. At the same time, I maintain that if we can pass something along the lines of the USA Freedom Act the way I initially wrote it, instead of the compromises we made with the administration, it would still be a bill that would allow us to have valuable tools to use against terrorists. While Senator Leahy, who sponsored the Senate version of the bill, and I both hold sacred the personal liberties afforded by the Constitution, neither of us is naive to the threats we face as a nation. With reforms, Section 215 would be less about balancing freedom and security than about recognizing that neither freedom nor security should be compromised. It's past time to secure the constitutional rights of American citizens and restore the country's faith in its intelligence community.
Thank you all for those strong statements on both sides of this issue. For this second question, I will address Ms. Shake It Off, Ms. Herman, and Congressman Sensenbrenner. As representatives on the panel who support the expiration of Section 215, given that the Patriot Act has been renewed along with Section 215 several times at this point, and data collection has been ongoing, why is it so important to remove what many see as valuable tools for national security? Ms. Herman, would you like to begin?
Yes, thank you. Section 215 gives the government means to investigate U.S. citizens for a broad range of activities in a manner that impedes on their First Amendment intellectual and Fourth Amendment privacy rights. Our religious practices, anti-war activism, and taste in books can be a basis for investigation under this section of the Patriot Act. Just because it's been continually renewed in the past does not mean that we shouldn't put a stop to this egregious abuse of our freedoms.
Thank you. Ms. Shake It Off, would you like to add?
Yes. Revelations began in June 2013 that the National Security Agency and the Federal Bureau of Investigation have been obtaining and storing vast amounts of personal information about millions of innocent people. These reports about the government gaining access of this data through the use of Section 215 of the Patriot Act emphasize the need to protect our constitutional rights as well as the need to stay engaged in these important debates. These revelations raise questions not just about personal privacy and surveillance, but also about open government and transparency. The American Library Association and our nation's libraries have been long committed to the principles of free speech, protection of privacy, open government, and access to government information. Section 215 goes against the ALA Code of Ethics. Quote, we protect each library's user's rights to privacy and confidentiality with respect to information sought or received and resources consulted, borrowed, acquired, or transmitted. End quote. Therefore, we will not stop fighting against Section 215.
Thank you. Congressman Sensenbrenner, as someone who supported this section of the Patriot Act for so long, how do you now see this issue?
Thank you, Ms. Cornish. I helped with the several renewals of the Patriot Act. We have gone to great lengths to ensure that our civil liberties are protected without compromising our national security. I am really disappointed that this administration, and I also believe the Bush administration was guilty, of going far beyond what Congress authorized to do. And here's why. The business records part of the Patriot Act, which we call Section 215, only authorizes the seizure of records through a warrant of the FISA court, which involves a foreigner who is the target of an authorized terrorist investigation, and nobody else. The only U.S. citizens who would be caught up on what the law says would be those who received calls from foreigners who are targets of authorized investigations, and nobody else. Bulk collection was never intended. As the primary author of the Patriot Act, I know the importance of our intelligence gathering authorities, but the law must be used as Congress intended. It's time to get this done and restore Americans' trust in their government. If if abuses of Section 215 persist, it will be very difficult to reauthorize these provisions when they sunset in June.
Senator Rubio, do you have something to say in rebuttal to these points?
I do. Thank you, Ms. Cornish. Mr. Sensenbrenner, after the tragedy of September 11th, these counterterrorism capabilities were legally and painstakingly made law in order to protect the very Americans who trust their government to keep them safe. We cannot ignore the tragedy that befell us 14 years ago, and we cannot allow more Americans to pay the ultimate price in another disaster. Thank you, Ms. Cornish.
Thank you. I'd like to invite any other rebuttals to these points.
Yes, actually, I would like to respond to that.
Representative McSally.
I understand the importance of maintaining privacy protection. It's something that I value as a citizen, but the protection of the nation should be our primary concern. We've faced similar issues several times, and for example, the issue with the border is something that I have dealt with being in Arizona, or looking at yelling fire in a theater or yelling bomb on a plane is no longer allowed. But some people actually rebuttal the fact that it's against free speech. But it is enforced due to the fact of the concern of the people as a whole rather than the individual. And looking at the Patriot Act, it is no different. By expiring the Patriot Act, we would allow terrorists who actually hide behind that law or not having the law, and they would be able to, for example, go to the library and recruit people, and there would be absolutely no documentation to prove what is going on. And we've already seen in recent months and the past year or two that by looking at people and by being able to follow people, we have stopped several Americans from joining ISIS, which is something that I think that we should be proud of.
May I add a comment on that?
Yeah.
What would you say to the question of, for example, a professor doing research on ISIS at his academic library, and then his activity there being surveyed and then actions being taken against him because he was a perceived threat due to his research, which is in fact promoting knowledge against these terrorist threats?
I don't think that would actually happen. People are already writing about ISIS and doing a lot of research. We've seen the same thing happen with the KKK or with Nazism, and those two groups are both still very active. But by being able to have a paper trail so that you can take these individuals to court and actually prosecute them for terrorism, I think is going to be vital in maintaining the safety of America, especially by keeping Americans from joining groups such as ISIS. Whereas somebody doing research is being used in a different way.
Okay, thank you. That's all we'll have time for today for our debate. To summarize, first I'd like to sincerely thank our panelists for taking the time to participate today, debating the extension or expiration of Section 215 of the Patriot Act. It seems that many stakeholders of the discussion support the expiration of Section 215, some on the grounds of protecting civil liberties, and some, as we've just heard, in favor of an application of information collection policy that is more faithful to its initial intention. However, Section 215 has been renewed before, and some see it as an essential tool to protect U.S. citizens from terrorist threats. We will see which argument prevails in practice as June 1st approaches. This is Audie Cornish, host of NPR's All Things Considered, thanking you for tuning in to this debate.
My name is Kate Gezi-Kopel, and I played Susan N. Herman in this debate.
My name is Megan Snyder, and I played James Clapper in this debate.
My name is Kathleen Worth, and I played Jim Sensenbrenner in this debate.
My name is Gloria Castrona, and I played Emily Shigado.
My name is Margaret McInnes, and I played Marco Rubio in this debate.
My name is Christina Anderson, and I played Martha McSally in this debate.
And my name is Ruth Keelis, and I played Audie Cornish in this debate.